that many people think the other lost mine stories of the superstitions grew out of the Lost Dutchman. That's not true. The Dutchman wasn't the first. It was the Lost Doc Thorne mine that came first, and I believe it was the Dutchman searching for the Lost Doc Thorne mine when he discovered what we know as the Lost Dutchman mine. Doc Thorne, in 1865, he ended out near Fort McDowell, which was just founded that year. He settled there and became well known to the Indians that lived up and down the Verde Valley near Fort McDowell. And I think there were one or two occasions where he performed a cure that to him was just ordinarily a day's work, but to the Indians appeared pretty miraculous. So they came to him one day and they said they wanted to do something for him, to in some way compensate him for the help that he had been to the Indians. They wanted to take him somewhere, but he would have to be blindfolded. They traveled for 2 or 3 hours. They crossed water several times, one of which he said was definitely a river, which he always felt was the Salt River. They eventually came to a point where they had to dismount. He was led a short distance, still blindfolded, led by hand. Then the blindfold was removed. Thorne found himself high in a canyon where he had a good view of the country. Some distance away, he said he saw what appeared to be the ruins of a stone-walled corral built out on the end of a ridge. And he said it didn't look to him like an Indian ruin. The only other landmark that he could see was, he said, to the south, perhaps as much as 5 miles away, was a tall peak shaped like the crown of a Mexican sombrero. Then they showed him that he was at the site of an old mine, where there was a pile of extremely high-grade hard rock ore. He was told that he might take away all that he could carry. And here he played a bit of a joke on the Indians. They thought he was going to fill his pockets. But it was cold weather. He was wearing long underwear, which he removed, tied a knot in each of the ankles, filled both legs up with rich gold ore, knotted it off at the waistband, sat it astraddle his horse, back of the cantle of his saddle, and, minus his underwear, shivered all the way back to Fort McDowell. The Indians took it good-naturedly. They said it looked like half a man riding behind Doc Thorne on Thorne's horse. And there in 1869, he met C.E. Cooley, Corydon Cooley. Cooley believed Doc Thorne's story and decided to organize his own expedition to search for the lost Doc Thorne mine. Cooley led a small army of prospectors. I've heard once that they claim he had 267 men. And one of the members of the Phoenix detachment was Jacob Waltz. Milton F. Rose, who I think was actually a mining engineer, many years ago wrote a manuscript that he called the Rainbow's End, in which he told the lost Doc Thorne story. And he maintained that a relative of his, that he called Will Rose, evidently William Rose, was a member of one of the 2 Doc Thorne expeditions. And that on that trip he became well acquainted with Jacob Waltz, the Dutchman, sat around the campfire many evenings visiting with Jacob Waltz. Now, there being no roster, I can't prove that Jacob Waltz was on one of the expeditions. But Milton Rose's story about the Dutchman being on the search for the lost Doc Thorne mine explains an otherwise enigma, a question: what in the world was Jacob Waltz doing in the Superstition Mountains in 1869? This logically explains that, so I accept Milton Rose's version. Well, at any rate, that expedition was also unsuccessful. But when the rest had disbanded and left, only the Dutchman remained behind at Fort McDowell, where he re-outfitted himself and headed back to Superstition Mountain alone. Or perhaps the Dutchman felt some sort of impending destiny calling him back to Superstition Mountain. Well, if that were the case, he certainly got that right.
Thank you for watching this episode of Mysteries of the Superstition Mountains.